Hi, I'm Austin Allen Hamblin. I've written a ton of comics you've probably never heard of, including The Adventures of Punk and Rock, The Headless Headband, and soon to be from Top Cow Comics, the Stairway Anthology. And you are watching Two Geeks Talking.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. Two Geeks Talking is an entertainment industry interview show where we interview the creative people from the comic, film, TV, movie, and video game industries. And of course, I'm your host, Kurt Sasso. We are joined by a past guest today. He is coming back on the show to talk about some really great stuff that is going on in his life creatively. He was on the show in the past from The Adventures of Punk and Rock, and a couple of other things that I can't recall that I'm sure we'll get into. But he is now a writer on the Starlight Anthology, which is being published by Top Cow and Image Comics. You know him as Austin. I know him as Austin as well. We are welcoming Austin Hamblin, of course, from HamblinComics.com. How you doing today, Austin?
I'm doing awesome. Very excited to be back. This is my third time on here.
Is it
making the old? Yes, this is the hat trick today, right now. So
glad someone's keeping track because I haven't been.
Well, with the amount that you've done, I mean, it's much easier for me to be like, oh yeah. And I think they're actually, I looked it up, and I feel like they're actually like each one are 2 years apart. It was 2018, and then 2016 before this. Here we are in 2020.
All right.
So it's kind of cool.
Every 2 years is actually pretty consistent for a show like this, so that works out.
Yeah.
Awesome. So welcome back to the show again, third timer. So I don't do badges for the 3-timers club. I do it for the 5-timers and up. So it is
getting closer.
Yeah,
getting closer.
So we're here to talk about, of course, you're writing a story in the Stairway Anthology from, of course, Top Cow and Image Comics, and tell us how that all came about.
This is one of the weirdest things that you'll probably never hear as an answer again. For how did you end up doing a story at Top Cow? So how this actually came about was so they did a comic that was called Stairway, and they launched it on Kickstarter, I think in 2018, and they had done it as a way to try to reach a new audience because they already do comic shops and all that, and they wanted to try to reach a new audience that might just be fans of Kickstarters or someone on Kickstarter. So they did this. And they had a couple of of like these high-end tiers, and one of them, and Matt Hawkins, who runs Top Cow, did a video on Facebook talking about how they were going to do these 5 spots that you would get to workshop an anthology story with him, and then it would eventually be published in an anthology by Top Cow. And it was a big dollar amount, I won't say how much, and I kind of was on the fence about it. I'm like, I don't know. And they sold out right away. And I'm like, okay, that solves that. And they ended up adding more, and I was in the bathroom at work at my old horrible job that I'm not at anymore, and I saw that they added 5 more, and I scooped it up. I wanted the opportunity because Image has always been my favorite publisher, and that's no BS. That's not me just putting them over for no reason. I would say that superheroes got me into comics. That's what got me into a comic store. It's what got me reading comics. And then Image is what pulled me in because of what they do for creators' rights and how well they treat their people. And so that's kind of how it happened. And I read Top Cow books. I was actually probably knew about Top Cow before I was super into comics because I knew about the Witchblade anime from that, and I was familiar with the Darkness as well. And it's cool to now, if I don't go any further in my career than this, I at least in some small way get to be a part of one of my all-time favorite publishers. So that's pretty awesome.
Did you work directly with Matt as well throughout the entire process of this, or?
Yeah, so they kind of had someone through the publisher that was kind of wrangling the project after the edits came through. But yeah, Matt did edit. Matt and Ryan Cady, he was a former DC Writers Workshop guy, and who has done a bunch of stuff for Top Cow in editing and in writing. He also gave edits, as well as Henry, and I'm gonna probably not say his last name correctly, and I apologize for that. Henry Baharas or Baharis. Sorry, Henry. He's like the one of the marketing guys and internal publishing guys, but got edits from all three of them, and it was the scariest thing ever, because Think Tank, which is a comic that Matt did, is awesome. And Matt is, though he's not a founder of Image, he's always been at Image. He was an editor at Extreme Studios for Rob Liefeld, and then ended up now running Top Gal for Silvestri. So knowing that he was going to read my script, it terrified me into it turning out really good. It was the pressure that turned this into a diamond, and I'm really, really proud of the story that we managed to create. So,
can you give us a hint as to what it is?
I could do that. So the title of the story is Big Guns, Stupid Rednecks. I even just the title there, people were like, wait, what? I'm like, yes. I have this fascination with rednecks and redneck culture because I live in Iowa, which is and I live in a super rural area. My dad is like, there's a country music song, and I don't know what it's called, but in the song the guy goes, I'm a son of a third generation farmer. That's actually me.
Mm-hmm.
All my lineage is farmers. My dad was. My dad also worked at John Deere, and for those unfamiliar with John Deere, they make tractors. Mm-hmm. And my dad worked there. They have a big plant just a couple towns over. So I went to Catholic school as well. So in a tiny town. And like King of the Hill, love King of the Hill, yeah. Spot on. There's people that I see on that show that are in my community. There's actually a house I used to have to walk by to go to school, and every morning or every afternoon after school, there was 4 guys sitting. I don't think they were drinking beer, because I think they couldn't drink beer anymore because they were so old. But they right out the garage, and I was like, oh my! And there was 4 of them, so it was crazy. Now, I digress. The story takes place after a string of unexplained disappearances in the southern part of the United States. Clint gets guilted by his sister to look into the disappearance of his brother Clay. Clint had always wanted to get away from his family because his brother was kind of your POS kind of guy, drug addict, could never hold down a job, and Clint was always lumped in with him. But Clint, as soon as he could, got away, went to the police academy, ended up becoming the state's best detective, and now he's an old man, and he's looking into the disappearance of his brother, and that's kind of all I can give away. It is nuts. And it's a 7-page story, and it gets really crazy. But that's kind of is the premise: is him looking into his brother that he doesn't even like, because his sister guilts him into doing it.
That's awesome. The title alone is perfect. I mean, it's just I love it.
Thank you. It really, this is something that has been permeating in my mind a long time. I had tried to pitch it a few years back. To a couple different places, and I don't think I had the writing chops needed at the time to pull this story off. Mm-hmm. And then obviously, because I think it was probably 4 years ago that I had pitched it, and then now I had written a lot more stuff, and then be able to send it in and get notes from these guys, like editors, because it's usually just me, self-publishing or working with small press, and it's pretty much just me, so getting from these guys who have over 20 years experience, in comics, it made it that much better. And I love it. I know, like, a lot of times when like projects will take a while, or just because they take a while anyways, because soliciting, and so it's like I've seen the finished book or pages here for months, but it still won't come out until October 7th. But and a lot of times you end up hating it by the time you're done. But I love it, and I'm so excited, and I can't give away the big twist in the story. So when people do read it, I'm stoked to see what they think.
Well, I think it's great. Now talk about, you said, I mean, these guys are top editors of course in comics, and fans the world over, I'm sure, have all read their books. But as a writer, though, I mean, besides the nervousness of it when you first submitted or first received, say, an email back from them saying, their notes or whatever, what was going through your mind? Just like, you have the opportunity to work with these big name editors. As a writer, how was that for you?
Oh, it was terrifying. If I told you I wasn't scared, I would be lying. You know, it's like, and I knew what I was getting into, and it's exactly what I needed, and I wanted it. But that doesn't mean that it was easy. I I think it was like I sent it in, and then I got notes like maybe 3 weeks later. And so for 3 weeks, all that was running through my head was, what if he hates it? And I look, and the other thing too about Hawkins specifically is that not only do I like his work, but he does a lot of stuff for the comics community in doing the Top Cow talent hunts, and I also like identify with him like as a person. A lot of the like following him on social media and him talking about not necessarily politics, but everyday life stuff, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's like I agree with you. So it was scary, and I think that's really what made me make sure I had everything in order. And I sent it in, and of course they had notes, and they were 100% right, and it was stuff that I wouldn't have caught or been like, oh, doing that does make this so much better. And I actually like in his email, he's like, I really like this story. I actually chuckled out loud a couple times, and then he gave me my notes, and I'm like, oh, like I printed the email off, and like just like would like stare at it and be like, it felt like a big win, just to know, he didn't have to, tell me that he liked it. Could have just gave me the notes, but like to be like, no, I like this, and like to get someone to chuckle from a script, the script is the barest form of a comic you can have. Then I'm like, I think I got something here.
It's being published in October, and comic book stores everywhere. Is there codes or anything like that we have access to that we can?
I do not have the code on the top of my head, but it is it is currently on pre-order on Amazon as well. I believe Amazon ships a week later than comic shops. It'll be in comic shops October 7th, and then October 13th, I believe, is what is the date of from Amazon. So I'm trying to, like things are so crazy right now that I tried to get a signing set up, but people are kind of wanting to avoid that right now. And I understand that 100%, and I had reached out. The nice thing about being in Iowa, though I was just, telling how rural it is, I am 4 hours from Minneapolis. I am 5 hours from Chicago. I am 5 hours from St. Louis, 5 hours from Kansas City, 4 hours from Omaha. So I am right within driving distance of all these big places, which you wouldn't think of that in Iowa, but I am. And I'd reached out to a couple places, but they're like, we're not really doing that kind of stuff right now. And I understand that. But that doesn't mean the hype train's got to stop. I mean, that's why I'm here. I'm doing everything that I can, because I don't want to squander any opportunity. I hate I use the word big dick energy, and I know that's not the politically correct thing to say, but like hype, like I'm like, and like especially in self-publishing comics, you've always got to be your own hype man. Mm-hmm. So it's cool to like get emails with promotional material from the publisher, like here's some stuff you can share on social media, because I've never had that. It was always whatever I could make, or zooming in on a panel from the book. So having their support, having them just try to hype it because they're publishing it, they want it to succeed as well, is also awesome. Sure. So it's really cool to be in the machine instead of just being kind of one guy yelling on an island hoping somebody can hear going by. I've got these people handing me like bottles I can at least throw out into the sea, kind of.
Basically you're yelling against the void, and in this case now you have a megaphone.
Yes, that, there you go. that's a way better analogy than what I had. So
going back to then, you've done all this stuff. How long was this entire process from when did you have the story kind of like preformed? You had the story preformed in your mind, but from submission to notes to, yes, this is an acceptable final draft. How long did that roughly take?
I'm trying to think. The entire process took about 2 years, but that was also there was a lot of people wrangling in there because there was 10 of us, and getting notes on for each 10 of us and getting stories drawn and everything. I think for like my actual script is I think it was like three weeks after I sent it in, they sent me back edits, and I spent about a week reworking the edits, and then I sent it right back. I didn't want to, and I don't feel like I rushed it at all, because I did not, but I did not want to be the reason that anything got slowed down.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I wanted to show that I care about this, and I'm willing to put the time forth, and that I will not be the stick clogging the wheel. I will just do everything in my power I can to, you know, to keep things moving. Or even if I'm not making things go faster, I'm sure not going to be the reason that things slow down.
It's called being a professional, I think.
I think that's one of those things. I don't know much about that though. So.
You're on your way for sure. Do you know who your artist is then for this book?
Yeah, his name is Donnie Tran. He had done previously to this. He had done, I believe, a couple other things with Top Cow, but he had done a lot of work at Aspen, which is also kind of funny when you think about it, because Aspen was started by Michael Turner, and where did Michael Turner make his big comics debut? Top Cow. So that's kind of a cool thing, and I didn't realize that until right now. So that's really cool. He knocked it out of the park, and it was cool to, you know, where there's a publisher working in between you. It's like how much, you know, am I going to be in contact with the artist? And essentially, it was like we had an email thread that was me and him talking about this stuff, but CC'd was the people at Top Cow. Mm-hmm. So we did get to talk, and he you know, we did, like, he sent me thumbnails, and he's like, you know, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And he goes, how do you feel about changing this? Which I'm not one of those people that's like, oh no, it's my vision. No, if it makes it better, then let's do it. And he added some input, and he added, like, there's a specific panel that he added that I look and I'm like, oh, that makes that page so much more interesting and dynamic, just with that you know, that one little change. And I'm glad that he added it and was like, hey, can we do this? And that he wasn't afraid to do that. And because in the end, it just made the product better. So
awesome. That's great. I mean, just to see your vision from a bare form, and then finally get onto the page, and then now to be published in a cool anthology, and from a major publisher, or publishers rather. I don't know how much more better your life could be in that case.
You know, in the year of horribleness,
yes,
it is definitely a beacon of light for me. I can tell you that much.
But moving on, though, I mean, you also submitted a couple of other things. You did your own Kickstarter campaign, which was extremely successful. Talk about that. How did that come about?
Yeah, so I had there was a few months, and this was probably about a year and a half ago, where at all times I've always got like you're trying to cast out all these different nets and get all these comic projects going, and through no fault of anyone else, there was like 3 or 4 month spell where like no art was coming in for any of my projects. And for some people it was like, you know, hey, I'm slammed at work, or, you know, or hey, I got this other bigger opportunity, and it's like, oh yeah, you got to do it. And so there was about like 3 or 4 months where it was like I felt like I was doing all this writing, but there was no comics getting made, you know. And so I decided, I started this Word document called What I Want, was what it was originally called. And I just wrote short stories about whatever I wanted. Some of them were short fiction, or I'm sorry, some of them were nonfiction, some of them were fiction. You know, I wrote some poetry, I wrote some like dialogues and different things like that, because I kind of wanted to be in control of something. Doing that book, it was like, if you know, these stories don't get finished, it only falls on me. You know, the only thing was I had to get once I had the book finished, is I needed to get it edited for grammar, and, you know, get a cover for the book. And so my friend Trey Baldwin, who we've known each other for a while, he's an Iowa guy as well, and we're pitching some comics together right now. He did the cover, and we launched a Kickstarter to collect it, and it ended up being called Odds and Ends. And I really love the idea, because it's all this crazy stuff, whatever I felt like writing about. You know, if I'm not going to get paid to write stuff, why don't I write about the stuff that I want to, you know? And I put that up on Kickstarter, and hopefully going to be we ended up doubling our goal, and I'm going to be sending it to print here this coming week. Just waiting on a couple final things, and yeah, it was a really fun giant writing exercise that I think made me more well-rounded as a writer, and I learned a lot of things that I could also then take to use in my comic writing.
Tales from the Quarantine. That was the other thing. That seems like a pretty interesting concept, and it's on Kickstarter as well too.
That that came about through the most random circumstances ever. So my friend and I call him my comic book dad, Phil Hester, who's been working in comics professionally for over 30 years. So he's an Iowa guy, and he's known me since I was the annoying 10-year-old who was at every convention in the area, would ask him, what should I be doing? What do I need to do? And was like, annoying and didn't know how to control myself. Like it was one of those things where I was an overly excited kid. And he was the first person I'd ever met that had even ever made a comic, let alone this is what I do for a job. And I call him my comic book dad because he has two kids, and I am between them in age. One's a year older than me, and one's a year younger than me. But they don't do comics. They both pursued their own path, which he's totally cool with. But I come from like the complete opposite, where like most people actually pretty much nobody in my intermediate or extended family pursued any type of creative career at all. Actually, most of it has to do with agriculture. And so he kind of took on a mentor role for me, and we became really close. I was talking to him on the phone. I used to go down to his studio like once a month and just hang out while he was drawing stuff, and we would just kind of, shoot the breeze, and I would ask him for advice. We just kind of hang out. And now it's over the phone because with the whole pandemic. I was talking to him, and he goes, "Hey, I think I might have found something for us to work on together." I'm, oh, really? What's that? Like, I've been trying to get him for years. And he goes, "I got invited to there's a charity anthology that's going to be all based around the quarantine, and they asked me to write a story and draw a story, but my life didn't really change. I already worked from home. His wife was a teacher, so it was just like his wife was home early from teaching, like early summer. And he's like, so I don't think an interesting story to tell." And he had asked them to, get him a script, and he would still draw it. He wanted to be a part of it, but they didn't because in a second I'll explain why. And he told me, he goes, could you write something? I work as a butcher at a full service meat counter in a grocery store. So I was working at a grocery store where when people were hoarding groceries, when people were panic buying, when people were just acting panicky. And this story is about some of the things that I saw. And I didn't really know anything about it because it was all through Phil, and it was like, I just want to work with Phil. I don't care what this is, right? This could be in a newspaper that nobody reads. I just want to work with them, just once. It's on my creative bucket list with all these other crazy things. And then, come to find out, it's through this place called Red Cabin Comics, and it is filled. There's going to be over 600 people involved in this. They're all one-page stories. Chip Kidd did the logo. He did the logo for Jurassic Park and a bunch of other movies and famous logos. And it is filled with huge name comic creators. Jim Zub, Ron Mars, oh my gosh, Charlie Adler, the artist on The Walking Dead, the guy who wrote the first Hellboy movie, and just all these other people, and then Austin Allen Hamblin as well. And the campaigns are 45 days, but they've raised like 20 grand. They've hit their goal, and they've announced a lot of the talent on their Twitter, but they still haven't announced a lot of it. They're actually attempting to break a world record for most people working on, I don't know if it falls into like a graphic novel or what, but so all these one-page stories, there's you get 3 or 4 credits per page, and over 200-page book. I'm pretty excited to be a part of this, even though it was such a right place, right time. But I'll take it. I'll take anything.
That's awesome. I mean, And that's amazing to see how life comes full circle as well, because being that annoying kid that wants to be a creative talent, to find a creative mentor like Phil is incredible. So I mean, good
that he
job.
trusted me. That's the other thing too, like that he actually thought, like, obviously I had no idea who was going to be involved with this, but he knew that it was going to be a lot of big name people. That he was like, yeah, why don't you write something and I'll send it in. And that's why I think they never did end up finding him a writer, was because the amount of people that they are having in this and that are involved. That's a lot of people to wrangle and manage at once. So
Yeah.
like, I don't think it was they didn't want him to be a part of it. I just think it was just the sheer amount of people that they had involved in all the promotion and all the different things. So I'm very glad that I was able to do this, and I'm super excited to be able to hold this in my hand when it comes out.
Well, it's also a testament to the longevity of your career currently. I mean, you're still doing your comic, you're still doing the Adventures of Punk and Rock, and you're still writing some amazing stories. And now they're getting published, and now your career is slowly starting to take off, but it's taking off, and that's the great thing to see.
It's cool because I compare comics to like pro wrestling, and even if you don't watch pro wrestling, this will make sense. In pro wrestling, you can watch somebody come in that you've never heard of before, and they come in and they're not winning a lot of matches, but in a few years, then hey, look, maybe they win like a mid card title belt. Oh, and then you keep watching even longer, and then eventually they're now world champion. Or like in comics, you're like that too. Or like, and I was using like a totally WWE standpoint, where some of these guys will start wrestling in gymnasiums in front of no people, and then be wrestling at WrestleMania in front of 70,000 people. I mean, the first book I did of self-published stories, maybe in total had 300 people read it, which that actually is a pretty decent amount. I was still in high school, and so everybody at my tiny high school was convinced that I was going to be Stan Lee. So I had all these people buying. I actually had 100 for my first print run, and I sold out of it in 2 days. And I was just walking around with this box of comics at my high school, and people would stop me in the hallways, and I was like late for class. And I remember like one of my teachers was like, "Why are you so late?" And I'm like, "All these people stopped me because they wanted to buy a comic." And the teacher was like, "Oh, that came out? I want one of those." So it was like, they were all super supportive of that, and all wanted a copy. And like one guy was like, "I'm buying 2. I want you to personalize one to me to prove that I know you, and I want the other one. I'm going to sell it on eBay in 20 years." And I'm like, "Okay, that's fine. If you can get somebody to buy it in 20 years, then more power to you." But it was just kind of cool thing.
That's awesome. I mean, so then I guess the question is, what's next? What this after these are coming out? What else do you have down the pipe that you can talk about?
I don't. It's funny because like I don't have everything is like coming out at once here, but I like there's so much stuff I don't know. I mean, I've started writing Odds and Ends Volume 2. I'm like 20 pages into that.
Nice.
I've been pitching. Sending out some pitches to different publishers. I just Valiant put out an open call to do portfolio reviews with writers, and so I applied for that. And what's actually funny is both of the time slots that they have, I will probably be at work, and I've already talked to my boss. So if I get selected, what I'll have to do is I will have to clock out, go out to my car, get on my phone, do the portfolio review, head back into work, which is kind of funny because then it's like I don't look at that in a way like, oh, that sucks. It's kind of cool because it's like, look what you've been able to do while still doing all the things you're supposed to do as an adult, right? Like you're working, paying your bills, doing all the, household stuff that you've got to do, and finding time to do the things you enjoy. Not that this isn't one of the things I enjoy, because it is.
Yeah.
But, being able to find that balance, it's just kind of funny. And like my boss is awesome, and she is so supportive of me doing all this stuff that she is 100% rooting for me. She backed my Kickstarter. It's funny because I have family that didn't back, and then I have my boss who I've known for a year and a half. She backed it at a very generous amount, and she's always asking me about comic stuff. She'll see my social media posts, and she'll be like, because she's not a comics person, so she doesn't necessarily understand stuff, but she'll ask me because she does care. Like, she's like, like the Top Cow thing, when I kind of announced that, like, she doesn't know what Top Cow is, but I told her. She's like, well, that's really awesome. Like, I'm really happy for you. So it's cool, because even people, like, I feel like there's some people that are like, hey, I'm not into comics, but I like you. I care about you, and I want you to succeed. And so it's cool that people take interest, that would have maybe never ever picked up a comic, or reading a comic for the first time, and it's one that I wrote, and that's a pretty cool. I mean, I don't want to say responsibility, because that's not it, but that's like feather in my cap or something like that.
Yeah, totally. I think it's great to find support, especially in something that you love, from people that you would least expect it, and it's amazing, because especially with these interviews, like looking back on the archive and seeing the people that I first interviewed who are now working for DC or Marvel or Image or whoever else, and it's just like 10 years ago, 12 years ago, they were just like you when you started.
People don't forget that stuff, I think a lot of the times it's pretty easy to look at it in a negative standpoint and be like, look at all these people that didn't support me that I thought would. Or you just take the spin and be like, look at all these people who did support me, and look at the people that I didn't think would, who did, or would have never thought in a million years that this person would be, or like, like, just like a weird one is my best friend growing up, who was the best man at my wedding. He has a sister that's much older than both of us. And her husband, he backs all my stuff and buys all my stuff when it comes out, and that's like and I know him. I mean, I'm not super close with him, but it's cool that, like, he doesn't have to do this, but he does, and it means a lot. And like, I'll never forget that stuff. It's burning here. Like, also, like this, like I said, this is my third time being on the podcast. There was supposed to be a fourth. I was a part of that anti-bullying anthology,
yes.
And you did
with Ben
a podcast. Yes, and you had all the creators on, but I couldn't make it on because I was in high school and I had my class trip that weekend. And I was so bummed that I'm like, oh my God, because that would have been the first time I was ever invited, been on a podcast, period. And I was excited, and I didn't. But it was cool because she still talked about my story. And that also, the funny thing was, we went to Chicago for my class trip, same weekend as C2E2 was going on. And so we're doing all our stuff around Chicago, and there's just ads plastered everywhere for C2E2, right? Year? And I had never gone.
What year was that?
This would have been early 2013.
If you would have gone to C2E2, I would have been there.
That's even more nuts. I know, because I know that you have been, because I'd seen interviews that you had done there. I mean, like, since then I've gone to town. I've been able to go with my wife and my brother-in-law, and it's my favorite con. I was there in February, actually. There was pretty much only two big conventions that are going to happen this year, which was that one, and there was one in Mexico City, which name escapes me, but I was able to be at one of the only. I mean, I didn't set up. I was roaming around. But
yeah.
It's weird to think about, because the world kind of shut down 3 weeks later. Like, at that time, it was like, oh yeah, there's some sickness happening on the other side of the world, and I didn't think anything of it. And then here we are, 5 months later. So, and it just wasn't even a thought in my mind that something like this could happen, because I was in a group of how many people in Chicago, yeah. And then just living life, and then it's crazy how fast things could change.
That's hilarious. Just the connections, because Pam. By the way, Pam said to say hello as well, because I had her on yesterday, which is technically.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So she's like, "Oh yeah, I know Austin. He's a great guy. He's doing really good." I'm like, "Yeah." So there you go. And we were actually talking about that bullying campaign, or that bullying comic, and all that other stuff. And it's like, it's amazing, just how these connections come about, and it's now you're here.
And it's a small world too, because then it's funny to see you interview people that I know, or I know their work. Like when you had George on, I'm like, oh, that's funny, I didn't know those two knew each other. and then I see that you post an interview with him. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. The world is really a small world, but once you get into comics, it's a really small world.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially when you go to the conventions. It's like Fan Expo to C2E2 to, if I ever get there, San Diego Comic Con. I mean, it'd be crazy. Like, but it's small world. Yeah, it's crazy how your class trips in Chicago, and I'm there as well, doing 80 some odd interviews, and all you had to do was go to the McCormick place, and you probably would have seen me in Artist Alley.
It was, and it was funny because there was we had 5 hours of free time that we were just like us roaming around, and my one teacher was like, if you want to take a cab or whatever and go do that and come back, and I'm like, look, I said, I'm having a lot of fun on this class trip, but if I got in between those doors, I wouldn't be coming back. And I told my teacher that. She's like, it's probably better that you don't go then. Yeah, because I'm like, look, I'm having a lot of fun, but not that this isn't fun, but there's nothing that's above comics. So that's not a personal thing, but especially at that point in my life too, it's like I don't have no responsibilities either, so it's not oh, there's temporarily my mortgage is more important than comics or whatever. This is nope, comics number one.
Yeah, you just might as well leave me for the entire week, and I'll sleep under someone's Artist Alley table.
And what's funny is actually I probably would have known enough people there that I could have figured something out, is the other really weird thing. And then it would have been one of those things where it's I come back from my class trip. So how was your class trip? I'm like, I don't know. I was at C2E2 all weekend, Mom.
I mean, yeah, getting to Chicago is great, but
Yeah, it was yeah, I got there. I was with them, and I wasn't for the rest of the time.
Oh God, good stuff. That's amazing. In terms of your writing, though, since you've been last on, it's been a couple of years. How has your writing evolved since the last time we talked?
I don't want to say more meticulous, but there's things that the longer you do it, you start to think about that you wouldn't have thought about before. In any comic that I'm writing now, I really think about, oh, I want that to be on an odd number page because I want that to be the page turn reveal, or stuff like that. Or I'm like, oh, I want to use the dialogue to allude to something over here, so everybody thinks this way, when in reality I'm going the complete opposite direction. And I think it's just because the more you do something, the more that you try to do something, you're going to get better, and the things that you pay attention to will evolve because you can recognize things, and I can read old works of mine and be like, oh yeah, this was good for when I wrote it. If I would have done this, this could have been better. And I think it's good to acknowledge that, but not to dwell on it, because if you dwell on your past stuff, it can bring you down. But if you can learn from your past stuff, then it can bring you up. And I'm not saying I just take all my past work and just Sharpie over everything and analyze it for 100 years, but I do think there's something that can be learned. We did a Platform Comics did a contest earlier this year where so you applied ahead of time, and they sent you a theme and a line of dialogue, and you had 1 week to make a 4 to 8 page comic based on this information. And so we got a dystopian love story with the line of dialogue, they should have quarantined, or some variation of that. And that was really fun. And myself and Trey Baldwin did that. And that's going to be published in an anthology now coming up. We didn't win. We didn't even place, but it was so fun. And that we did that because it was oh, I need to think of an idea and I need to get it written down really fast so he can get started, and he's working and I'm working still on top of doing this. So he was really tired coming out of that week, and he was like, I'm taking a break this week. And I'm like, nope, you earned it. But we made a 4-page short story that I'm really proud of. That was a lot of fun. Doing stuff like that too. It's it's a learning experience, and we got a finished product out of it too that we can, I know a lot of people are like, oh, you should only put out, the best stuff that you do. And, there's a lot of people that will write stuff that no one will ever see. And I'm like, why? odds and ends, maybe some of the things in there are like, I tried to write something, I couldn't figure it out, and it was a fragment, but that fragment was still good. Why should that go unread? Maybe I didn't need to collect it into a book. Maybe I could have posted it on my blog or something, but I don't think you should waste anything. And I think that, there's the saying, finish not perfect. And I think that's a big thing. By the end of this year, I'll have over 30 things published in comics between anthologies and self-published work and whatever since 2012, and I've gotten something out every year since then. And it's like I'll be 26 in October, but I've been making comics for 8 years, which is kind of crazy to think about, because I don't think I've done anything else that long. And I'm like, eventually it's going to get to the point where I've been making comics more years than I haven't been making comics. So, and I'm excited for that to come.
What's some advice that Matt and the editors at Talk Cow gave to you to make you a better writer? Because I'm curious from a script writing perspective that I'm currently working on.
It all had to do with pacing, and how, like having there's like a scene where I had a panel with no I have a couple of pages. There's 2 different pages that have a panel with no dialogue, that is just meant as supposed to be like a pause in to make you like think. And that was what I was trying to accomplish with it, but I didn't hit the nail on the head the first time. So they were like, well, like, I don't know, that doesn't really work. But then we fixed it. One of them is someone, lighting a cigarette, smoking a cigarette. And the other one is someone drinking a beer. Like they say a line of dialogue holding the beer, and then there's a panel of them drinking the beer. And especially when I've got 7 pages and I want to tell this story, it's like you don't have a lot of time to mess around, but you don't want to be speeding through stuff, too fast. You don't want to make it not interesting, and so pacing and longer things can be harder and can be easier for different reasons. I know that sounds stupid, but it is. For short comics, so like that's all. I've written more short comics than I have full length, because it's so much easier for me to, especially when you start. It's like it's gonna be like, oh yeah, like if you can afford to pay someone, maybe I couldn't afford to hire someone to draw a 24-page comic, but I could afford to hire someone to draw a 6-page story for an anthology. And it's just like I'm sure no one jumped into writing their first novel. They wrote short stories, and then worked their way up to the novel, which that's kind of one of the things that Odds and Ends is too, is my attempt to get better at prose so that I can write a novel someday, just not as a career path. I don't want to pursue writing novels, but I would still like to write a couple of them just to prove to myself that I can. And then, all those people that told me, you're not a real writer because you write comics, are going to be like, well, I also wrote a novel, so whatever.
Oh, gosh.
You know those people.
Yeah. I might have run into them once or twice in my life, but especially when it comes to filmmaking. So, yeah, good times. Stories I could tell. We're kind of slowly wrapping up the interview in general, but as always, time flies with you, which is awesome, because I love chatting with you, because you're easygoing, and you. This great news in your life is something I'm glad that we were able to showcase, especially starting our 12th year here on Two Geeks Talking. So I mean, I want to make sure that I showcase the talent that I've come across in the years, and I'm glad that you're back again. So we'll make it a 4th time, we'll make it a 5th time. We'll make up for the class trip of Chicago 2013.
No, I love coming on here too, because this doesn't, this doesn't feel like. And I've been doing a lot more podcasts lately, but you do your research ahead of time. Not that you didn't know me already, but with everybody, you do your research ahead of time. So it doesn't feel like me having to inform you. You know, like you're asking the questions in a way so that I can inform the people listening, not so that you actually have no idea what I'm talking about or whatever, you know. And then like this doesn't feel like an interview, it just feels like I'm talking to my friends. So that's
Cool.
makes it fun.
I like it. Everyone has that one person that inspired them on their path to where they are today. You've mentioned this before, but in working with these editors, are they now the inspirational people that you can look up to, or is it still the same people that you had when you first started?
It's the biggest one is and is gonna always be Phil. Is gonna be Hester. And it's there's a lot of reasons for that, because I mean he had the same upbringing as me, right? He grew up in a tiny town, you know, far away from comic shops, and he used comics to kind of pull him out of the reality that he was into. Our taste in comics are kind of the same. You know, he reads manga, which I know a lot of people don't or haven't read a lot. He's read a lot of manga. He was a huge pro wrestling fan for a long time. And the most important thing that has nothing to do with making comics is he's just a fantastic human. He's just one of the best people I have ever met through across anything. And he's not only helped me, but there's many other people that he's helped. And I think he's the most underappreciated talent in comics. And he's always hustling. He's always making stuff. He never is sore about not getting an opportunity that maybe he should have got over someone else. He just keeps charging forward onto the next thing, and he makes his books. And if his book gets canceled, then he goes on to the next one. And he's managed to make a career out of that, and he's had a lot of success. And I think he's one of those people that just is often overlooked because he drew Green Arrow for like 4 years for Kevin Smith, for Judd Winick, and for Brad Meltzer. I mean, look at those names alone. He drew Swamp Thing for Mark Miller. He drew Ant-Man for Robert Kirkman. You know, he's worked with Grant Morrison. He's worked with every big name person you could ever think of, and he knows them all, and they all love him. And there's a reason. It's because he was a great collaborator, and he was just a great person. It's actually funny. The first time I ever met Matt at a con, this is way before any of this happened, you know, in the past 2 years. Phil introduced me to him, and this was about a year after Phil had been writing The Darkness. And you can tell there's been so many times that I've had him introduce me to people that they genuinely want to talk to me more because they know that his word means something, that he wouldn't just say, hey, this guy's going to ask you the same questions that everybody asks you, you know, or this guy's going to come up and pitch you his book. He'd be like, this is going to come and ask you some advice. And that was a really long answer. I love him. He's a great guy. I'll stop rambling because I could go on for a whole hour about him.
No, it's great. You know, mentors are hard to find, and especially in the creative field that we are in. So you find one, you hold on to.
Your life.
Him or her, I should say. From a professional standpoint, you're now getting noticed. You're now working at, now you wrote a story with Top Cow. You have done successful Kickstarter campaigns. You've now worked with your mentor, and hopefully will continue to work with your mentor on many things to come. Do you consider yourself successful?
Yes, I bust myself down a lot for not finding as much success as I would have liked to. But there was a recent revelation after a conversation I had at C2E2 with someone I met long before I ever met a comic, that just because you're not at the top of the mountain doesn't mean that you haven't climbed up a good portion of the mountain, because most people don't even make it off the ground.
That was your inspirational quote as well in the image you sent me to, so I like that.
Yeah. It's you know, it's one of those things to remember. No, I've not won an Eisner Award. I've not sold 1 million copies, but I mean, just do a lot, you know. And I should look back and be like, you know, you got to give yourself a pat on the back. You got to be your own biggest fan. You got to be your own hype man. So and that's to anybody that makes anything. Don't beat yourself up too much. And I know it's so easy to do. It's so easy to do, when things don't go your way, on things that are out of your control, when the world is literally falling apart. It's so easy to do that to yourself. But just take a minute to look at the things that you have done and be like, am I not dope for doing this? Yeah.
Can you say who is the person that gave you that bit of world-changing advice?
Yeah, it was Tom Kelly. Tom Kelly, I met at a tiny comic convention, and that was near where my sister lived in Illinois, and I used to. It was funny because I didn't know he was going to be at C2E2. I walked in the show floor. I was trying to find the Artist Alley map so I could find all the people that I had on my list to talk to, and then I just stopped because I saw he does these Hello Kitty drawings that are like different heroes, different pop culture things, and I knew it was him immediately. And I'm like, I don't know if he's going to remember me because I haven't talked to him in 8 years. I haven't talked to him, and he immediately, he knew who I was. He goes, "Hey, Austin." And then that was, I don't know, that meant a lot that he remembered me. And I apologized for annoying him, with these dumb questions and blah, blah, blah. And he told me, he's like, "You were never annoying." He goes, "I always looked at you as really excited about doing it, and that you probably didn't have a lot of people in your everyday life that understood, that you wanted to make comics, And he's like, "A lot of us have gone through that, creators." And so I sat there and talked to him for a while, and then that was how, through that conversation, and it felt really good, especially to be like, you were making comics before I was, and I was asking you what I needed to do, and then now I'm here, and then now I'm where I am now, and it's I don't know the word to describe it. It's like a crazy good feeling. There's been so many times where I'm like, I haven't talked to this person in years. There's no way they're going to remember me, and then I walk up and they say, "Hey, Austin," or they remember me and they're like, wow. They remember everything about me but my name, which is fine because a lot of these creators meet so many people at all these cons. Then I'm like, no. If you remember that I wrote The Adventures of Punk and Rock, it's cool that you don't remember my name because, right? Usually it's the other way around. So yeah, those moments are the best.
Totally.
And that moment, I will probably tell that story I hope to tell that story at a panel at Hall H someday at San Diego. Because I will, because that moment meant so much. I'm getting choked up right now. Like that really was like a hard reset that I needed, and it helped me change my perspective on a lot of things.
Well, I'd like to be front row at Hall H, though, if you do say that story. So
Well, I need a moderator.
Okay, done. Yeah, you twisted my arm. Okay, I'll send you my chiropractor bill. Oh. Obviously, the flip side of success is failure. Not to take it down or to that inspirational thing that you just said. How do you deal with failure?
Oh, it's tough. I mean, that's I personally, besides these revelations that I have, I've worked in for about 4 months now. I go to therapy. I have a lot of mental health issues that I have been struggling with since I was in high school, and failure is a hard thing. But through failure is where I've learned the most. You learn from successes, but failures you can really learn. And if you're failing, it means you're trying. It means you're living. It means you're trying to move forward. Even if you didn't get to move forward, or you didn't move forward very, very far, you did. And that's what matters. There's this quote that I love by Martin Luther King Jr. that is, if you can't, I don't know if I'm saying this 100% correctly, but you can't run, walk. You can't walk, crawl. All that matters is that you keep moving forward.
Now, like you were in your younger days and being that excitable, creative person and knowing the inspirational people that you followed, the younger generation are looking to you as an inspirational person because they're seeing the adventures of punk and rock. They're seeing, they're going to see the Stairway Anthology and your story, and they're going to see your work with Phil Hester, and they're going to become inspired themselves. So how can they inspire the generation that follows them?
For me, I've always said, pay it forward. I've been so lucky to have this relationship that I have with Phil, and if I ever get into I guess I slowly am getting there. I'm always willing to help. I mean, maybe I can't read your 100-page script, but if you're like, where do I get my book printed at? I can help you with that. Feel free to message me. Feel free to do that. Like, and what you can do is not just make comics, make the comics that only you can make. The Adventures of Punk and Rock, nobody else can make that book besides me and Scott. And I think that's important. Don't make a book because you think it'll get you hired somewhere. If you make something that only you can tell, and if you make it well, it will resonate with people. And it might take a while before you find that audience, and you might not find it right away. But if you can do, no matter how specific of a thing it is, if you can do it well, if you can pull from real life, you can do all these things, people will find it and people will appreciate that. And that's really what it's all about.
Love it. Good answer. Well, like I hinted at earlier, of course, we are at the end of this particular interview. And like always, it is a shame that I have to end an interview with you, Austin. It is truly a pleasure having you on.
I had so much fun. This was great. No, I really do. Really did.
So before we let you go, obviously, let's have you promote your social media. Let's have you promote whatever you would like to promote, of course. And where can we find you on this wide world?
The easiest way to find all of my social media is hamblincomics.com. That's HAMBLIN comics.com. If you scroll to the bottom, it's got my Instagram, my Twitter, my Facebook. I'm very active on my Facebook. It's like a likable author page. I'm very active on that. Also Twitter as well. Instagram, I post a lot of pictures of my cats or comics I'm reading and memes, all those things. And I just want to say that anybody listening to this right now, if you hear this, hit me up on any form of social media. Let me know that you heard me on Two Geeks Talking, and I'll send you 50 pages of comics that I've written in PDF form, just as a thank you for listening, because I really do appreciate it.
It's actually a video as well, too. I haven't posted an audio
that's right.
in a while. Remember YouTube. So anyone that sees us on YouTube,
anybody that could see, if you could see me, if you can hear me, if you can feel or touch me, then I don't know how you're doing this. I don't know where you're at. So then I'm a little worried, but yeah, just to be like, yo, hey, I heard you interviewed on Two Geeks Talking, and I'll send you over some PDFs. All I'll need is your email. I'll send them over in a Dropbox.
That's awesome. That's really good stuff. Truly, every 2 years is actually a pretty good venue. Although I'd love to do it yearly, but
What more to talk about if we wait 2 years?
Exactly, that works out well. You know me. I'm all about promoting the creative talent. Like I said, that unfortunately ends this episode of Two Geeks Talking. Of course, Austin Hamblin, as always, thank you for coming on the show. It's always been a pleasure, and it'll keep being a pleasure, I'm sure. And one of these days, I may go down to Iowa and go to a comic convention or something.
There's not much.
All right. I'll see you in C2E2 then.
See you at C2E2.
We are going to have Canadian punk rock singer and actress Biff Naked on the show. She is, you've seen her on Buffy, Angel, and a couple of other sci-fi shows as well. I think Firefly maybe. Look up her IMDb. She's an extremely talented individual, and I can't wait to have her on the show. So it'll be really interesting. In October, we're going to have, of course, the ever-talented Jules Rivera. Of course, her work from Love Jules on Instagram, as well as the Valkyrie Squadron and March Rocket and a bunch of other amazing, talented work that she's done. So she's going to be talking about a brand new project that I won't spoil because I want her to talk about it. So it's going to be huge for her. I can't wait to see it. From what I've seen, it looks incredible. So you can find, of course, this interview and all of our works on youtube.com/TGT Media. You can find more social media about myself, at Kurt Sasso on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram as well. If you want to be on the show, you just have to message me on any one of those social media platforms and we'll get in contact. And Twitter is usually my main form of getting in touch with people that want to be interviewed on the show of the geeky nature. Anyhow, thank you for listening and watching. Tune in next week for another great interview on Two Geeks Talking, where everyone has a story to tell, and it's up to me to help bring that out.